I thought I knew my wife until I found that receipt in the wrong jacket pocket. What started as a simple case of mistaken identity led me to discover a web of lies that nearly cost me everything I'd worked for. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning the perfect financial murder. And when I disappeared with our life savings, she tracked me down with a smile and a death threat. My name is Grant Hart. I'm 42 years old, and until recently, I owned morning grounds on Southeast Division Street in Portland. Nothing fancy, just good coffee and homemade pastries that took me 8 years to build from a rundown diner. I married Valerie 5 years ago, and with her came Chloe, who was 11 then. The kid's biological father had bailed when he found out Valerie was pregnant. I thought I could be different. I thought I could be the father Chloe never had. Boy, was I wrong. Chloe never warmed up to me, not once in 5 years. I'd pick her up from private school, 15 grand a year I was paying, and she'd grunt hello before plugging in earbuds. When I asked about her day, she gave one-word answers. When I tried helping with homework, she'd roll her eyes and say she'd rather figure it out herself. She's just shy, Grant, Valerie would say. Give her time. 5 years of time. And the kid still looked at me like I was some stranger sleeping in her mother's bed. The irony wasn't lost on me. I worked 70-hour weeks paying for Chloe's education, clothes, phone, everything, while she treated me like hired help. Meanwhile, Valerie worked part-time at a boutique, bringing in maybe a quarter of what I made. But I told myself it was worth it. I was building something, a family, a legacy, a life that meant something. The first warning sign came in March. I was doing inventory late Tuesday night when I realized I'd forgotten my keys at home. Instead of calling Valerie, I decided to drive back and grab them. When I pulled into our driveway, the living room lights were on, which was strange because Valerie usually went to bed early on weeknights. I let myself in quietly, not wanting to wake Chloe. That's when I heard laughter from the kitchen. Not just Valerie's laugh. Someone else was there. A man's voice, low and confident. I stood in the hallway, listening. My heart started beating faster, but I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe her brother had stopped by. Then I heard Valerie say, "You're terrible, Julian. What if Grant comes home early?" Julian. I didn't know any Julian. I cleared my throat loudly and walked into the kitchen. Valerie was sitting at our breakfast table with a tall guy in an expensive suit. He had the kind of confidence that comes with money and good looks. "Hey, honey," Valerie said, her voice too bright. "You're home early. This is Julian Andrews. He's helping me with investment advice for the boutique." Julian stood up and extended his hand. "Grant, right? Valerie's told me so much about you. Great little place you've got. I'll have to stop by sometime." I shook his hand, but something felt off. Investment advice at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night? In our kitchen? Julian was just leaving, Valerie said quickly. After he left, I asked about him. She explained the boutique was thinking about expanding, and Julian was a financial advisor specializing in small businesses. It sounded reasonable enough, but reasonable didn't explain why she'd never mentioned him before or why they were meeting at our house instead of his office. That night, I lay awake while Valerie slept beside me. Something had shifted, but I couldn't put my finger on what. I just knew the life I thought I was building was starting to feel fragile. The next few weeks passed in a blur of doubt and paranoia. I found myself checking Valerie's phone when she was in the shower, looking through her purse when she left it on the counter, even driving by the boutique during my lunch breaks to see if Julian's car was parked outside. I felt like a crazy person, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. The restaurant was suffering because I couldn't focus. I burned a batch of scones, messed up 3 catering orders, and snapped at my assistant manager, Sarah, when she asked if everything was okay. "You seem distracted lately," Sarah said one afternoon while we were prepping for the dinner rush. "Is everything all right at home?" I want to tell her. Sarah had been with me since the beginning, and she had good instinct about people. But what was I supposed to say? That I thought my wife might be having an affair based on one late-night meeting with a financial advisor? "Just tired," I said instead. "Been working too many hours." Sarah nodded, but I could tell she wasn't buying it. At home, things got worse. Valerie started getting more phone calls, always stepping outside to take them. When I asked who it was, she'd say it was the boutique owner discussing expansion plans. The same expansion plans that apparently required meeting at our house and taking mysterious phone calls at all hours. Chloe, meanwhile, seemed to sense the tension. She started spending even more time in her room, coming down only for meals. When she did talk, It was usually to complain about something I'd done wrong. "Grant, you put too much salt in the pasta," she'd say, pushing her plate away. "Grant, can you turn down the TV? I'm trying to study." "Grant, Mom said you might not be able to afford my summer camp this year. Is that true?" That last one hit me like a punch to the gut. I never said anything about not being able to afford summer camp. The camp cost $3,000, which was steep, but manageable. Why would Valerie tell Chloe that? When I confronted Valerie about it later that night, she shrugged it off. "I was just being cautious," she said. "The boutique expansion is going to require some investment from us. I thought we should start preparing Chloe for the possibility that we might need to cut back on some things." "What kind of investment?" I asked. "Julian thinks we should put in about $50,000 to really make it work," she said casually, like she was talking about buying groceries. $50,000. Half of our savings. "Don't you think that's something we should discuss together before you start telling our daughter we can't afford her activities?" I said. Valerie's face hardened. "Julian says you have to spend money to make money, Grant. Maybe if you thought bigger, the restaurant would be more than just a neighborhood coffee shop." That stung. I'd built Morning Grounds from nothing, and it was successful by any reasonable measure. But apparently, reasonable wasn't good enough for Valerie anymore. That night, after 5 years of marriage, I realized I was walking away from everything I thought I knew about my wife. The betrayal was becoming impossible to ignore. I just didn't know how deep it really went. I decided to hire a private investigator. Not the kind of thing I ever thought I'd do, but desperation makes you do crazy things. A guy named Rick Morrison who'd done some work for other restaurant owners dealing with employee theft. He was expensive, $200 a day plus expenses, but I needed to know the truth. "Just give me proof." I told him over coffee at a diner across town. "Whatever's going on, I need evidence." Rick nodded. He was a former cop, mid-50s, with the kind of weathered face that had seen it all. "Usually takes about a week to get what you need. Cash only, and I'll call you when I have something solid." While Rick did his thing, I tried to act normal at home. I made breakfast, drove Chloe to school, worked at the restaurant, came home for dinner. All the usual routines, except now everything felt like an act. Valerie, meanwhile, kept pushing the investment idea. She'd bring up Julian's business plan at dinner, mentioning how much money we could make if we just took this opportunity seriously. "Julian says the boutique could triple its revenue within 2 years," she said one night while Chloe picked at her food. "But we need to move fast before someone else gets the prime retail space." "What retail space?" I asked. "There's a corner unit opening up in the Pearl District. Julian knows the property manager. He can get us in, but we need to show financial commitment." The Pearl District. That was serious money territory. The kind of place where rent alone would cost more than most people's salaries. "How much are we talking about total?" I asked. "Maybe $150,000 to get started properly," Valerie said casually. $150,000. Our entire savings, plus a loan against the restaurant. That's a huge risk, Val. What if it doesn't work out? Valerie's eyes flashed with annoyance. "That's exactly the kind of small thinking that keeps people stuck, Grant. Julian says successful people take calculated risks." "Julian says." Everything was what Julian says now. 2 days later, Rick called. "We need to meet. Tonight. Same place as before." When I got to the diner, Rick was already there with a manila envelope on the table. He looked grim. "I'm sorry, Grant," he said, sliding the envelope across. "But you needed to know." Inside were photos. Valerie and Julian at a hotel. Valerie and Julian at restaurants. Valerie and Julian walking hand in hand through Pioneer Courthouse Square like they were a real couple. The last photo showed them kissing in the parking lot of the boutique where Valerie worked. "How long?" I asked. "From what I can tell, about 4 months. Maybe longer." For months. While I was working myself to death to pay for Chloe's school. While I was lying awake at night, worrying about our marriage. While I was considering investing our life savings in Valerie's dream business. "There's something else," Rick said. "This Julian Andrews character? He's not a financial advisor. He's a real estate developer. And he's got a history of getting involved with married women who have access to money. Your wife isn't his first mark." I stared at the photos until they blurred. 5 years of marriage. And I was looking at proof that my wife was not only cheating on me, but setting me up to be robbed blind. I drove home that night, knowing everything was about to change. After 5 years of marriage, I was finally ready to walk away after discovering her betrayal. I didn't confront Valerie immediately. Instead, I did what any smart business owner would do. I protected my assets. First thing Monday morning, I moved our joint savings account into my name only. Then I called my lawyer and had him start divorce papers. Valerie noticed the missing money by Wednesday. "Grant, what happened to our savings account?" she asked, cornering me in the kitchen after Chloe had left for school. I tried to transfer money for the boutique investment, and the bank said the account was closed. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and wondered how I'd been so blind. She was good, I'd give her that. Even now, caught red-handed, she was still playing the innocent victim. "Sit down, Val," I said, pulling out one of Rick's photos and placing it on the counter. The color drained from her face as she stared at the image of herself kissing Julian in broad daylight. "I can explain," she started. "No," I said, cutting her off. "You can't. This isn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. This is you and your boyfriend trying to steal my life savings." Valerie's mask finally slipped. The sweet, confused wife act disappeared, replaced by cold calculation. "You don't understand what you're dealing with, Grant," she said. "Julian isn't just some guy. He has connections. If you think you can just take my money and walk away, you're wrong." "Your money." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Every penny in that account came from my restaurant. Every bill in this house gets paid with my income. You work part-time at a boutique and run around with con men. That's when she played her trump card. "If you divorce me, you'll never see Chloe again," she said. "I'll make sure of that. I'll tell her you abandoned us, that you chose money over family. She already barely tolerates you. Imagine how she'll feel when I tell her you threw us out over some photos." It was a gut punch, but I'd been expecting it. Valerie had always known that Chloe was my weakness. "You're right," I said. "Chloe doesn't see me as her father. She never has. Maybe it's time I stopped pretending otherwise." I'd already packed my essentials. They were in my truck, along with copies of all the financial documents and Rick's evidence. "Where are you going?" Valerie demanded as I headed for the door. "Somewhere you can't find me," I said. "The divorce papers will be served by Friday. Don't try to contact me." "You can't just leave," she shouted. "What about the restaurant? What about your responsibilities?" I turned back one last time. "The restaurant's already sold. Closed the deal yesterday. As for my responsibilities, I fulfilled them for 5 years while you planned to rob me blind." Valerie's face went white. "You sold morning grounds. Got a good price too. Enough to start over somewhere far from here." I walked out of that house and drove straight to the highway. In my rearview mirror, I could see Valerie standing in the doorway, her phone already pressed to her ear, probably calling Julian to tell him their easy mark had just disappeared. 3 hours later, I was in Seattle, checking into a motel and planning my next move. I felt lighter than I had in months. For the first time in years, I was free. 6 months later, I was running a small breakfast diner in Bend, Oregon. Nothing fancy, just eggs, bacon, and coffee for the local construction crews and early risers. I'd bought the place with cash from the restaurant sale and kept my head down. The previous owner, an old guy named Bill, had been looking to retire for years. He taught me the ropes in 2 weeks, then headed to Arizona to live with his daughter. "Don't overthink it, son," Bill told me on his last day. "Good food, fair prices, and treat people right. That's all there is to it." I went by Gary now, close enough to Grant that I wouldn't slip up, different enough that anyone looking for Grant Hart would come up empty. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment above a hardware store and drove a used pickup truck I bought off Craigslist. It was a simple life. Quiet. Safe. The diner opened at 5:30 every morning, and I was usually there by 4 prep. Pancake batter, coffee brewing, bacon on the grill. By 6, the place was full of guys heading to job sites and office workers grabbing coffee to go. I liked the routine. No drama. No complicated relationships. No teenagers rolling their eyes at everything I did. Just honest work and honest people. My regulars started calling me Chef Gary, which was ridiculous since I was barely managing not to burn the hash browns. But it felt good to be respected for something simple and real. The money wasn't great, maybe half what I made with morning grounds, but my expenses were low. No private school tuition, no boutique investments, no wife spending money on clothes and mysterious lunch dates. I think about Chloe sometimes, wonder how she was adjusting to the divorce, whether she missed me at all. Probably not. She'd probably celebrated when Valerie told her I was gone. One evening, while I was closing up the diner, a woman came in just as I was flipping the sign to closed. "Sorry," I called out. "Kitchen's shut down for the night." "I'm not here for food," she said. "I'm looking for Grant Hart." My blood turned to ice. She was maybe 40, professional looking, with the kind of confident posture that screamed law enforcement or private investigator. "Never heard of him," I said, continuing to wipe down the counter. "Really? Because your truck is registered to a Grant Hart from Portland. Same guy who used to own Morning Ground Cafe." I stopped wiping and looked at her directly. "What do you want?" She smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "My name is Detective Sarah Chun with Portland PD. We need to talk." Detective Chun sat across from me in one of the diner booths, a cup of coffee growing cold between us. She had the kind of direct stare that made you want to confess to crimes you hadn't committed. "Your ex-wife filed a missing person report," she said. "Claimed you disappeared without a trace. Left behind financial obligations. Abandoned your stepdaughter." "I'm not missing," I said. "I'm divorced and living my life." "That's what I figured. But there's more." Chun opened a folder and pulled out some documents. "Valerie Hart and her boyfriend Julian Andrews are being investigated for fraud. Turns out they pulled this same scam on 2 other men in the past 3 years." I leaned back in the booth. "Scam. The whole routine. Girlfriend claims to need investment money for a business opportunity. Boyfriend poses as a financial advisor. They drain the guy's accounts and disappear. Except you disappeared first." Chun slid a photograph across the table. It showed Julian and another woman I didn't recognize. "This is Julian with his previous mark. David Rodriguez, small business owner in Eugene. Lost $200,000 before he figured out what was happening." "What happened to David?" "Bankruptcy. Divorce. Last I heard, he was working construction and living in his brother's garage." I stared at the photo, thinking about how close I'd come to the same fate. If I hadn't hired Rick, if I hadn't discovered the affair when I did, I'd probably be living in someone's garage too. "So why are you here?" I asked. "If they're being investigated, what do you need from me?" Chin's expression softened slightly. "Valerie's been looking for you. Hard. She hired a private investigator, filed missing person reports in 3 states, even contacted your sister in California." "I didn't have a sister in California, but I didn't correct her. She's desperate to find you, Grant. And desperate people do desperate things." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk." "V." I showed the message to Chun. She frowned. "How'd she get this number?" "I have no idea. I've been careful about." Another text came through. "I know where you are." Chun stood up quickly. "We need to go. Now." "What?" "What?" "Because if Valerie found you, Julian's probably not far behind. And Julian doesn't like loose ends." Through the diner window, I could see a black sedan pulling into the parking lot. Even in the dim light, I recognized the blonde hair behind the wheel. Valerie had tracked me down, and she wasn't alone. Detective Chun and I slipped out the back of the diner as Valerie's sedan pulled up front. We made it to Chin's unmarked police car, just as I heard the diner's front door chime. "Stay low," Chun whispered, starting the engine. "Let's see what they do." Through the car's tinted windows, I watched Valerie enter the diner with Julian close behind. Even in the dim light, I could see the tension in their body language. This wasn't a social visit. "They're looking around," Chun observed. "Checking the kitchen, the back office. They know you were here recently." Julian emerged first, pulling out his phone and making a call. Valerie followed, her face twisted with frustration. She kicked at a loose piece of gravel in the parking lot. The composed mask she'd always worn was gone completely. "They're desperate," Chun said. "The fraud investigation's closing in, and you're their only way out." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. You disappeared before they could drain your accounts. You've got evidence of their scam, and you're the one victim who got away clean. If they can convince you to come back, claim it was all a misunderstanding, they might avoid prosecution." My phone buzzed again. Another text from Valerie. "I saw you leave. We can work this out, Grant. Julian has a proposition." I showed Chin the message. She frowned. "Don't respond. They're fishing for confirmation that you're here." But I was tired of running. 6 months of looking over my shoulder, 6 months of living under a fake name, 6 months of wondering when they'd find me. Maybe it was time to face this head on. "I want to hear what they have to say," I told Chun. "That's a bad idea. You're here with me. You're armed. And I need to know what they want." Chin studied my face for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but we do this my way. Public place, lots of witnesses, and I call for backup first. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in the local diner across town, a place called Mom's Kitchen that stayed open late for the highway truckers. Chun had positioned herself at a corner table with a clear view of all the entrances, while I sat with my back to the wall. Valerie and Julian arrived exactly on time. They looked out a place in the blue-collar diner. Julian in his expensive suit, Valerie in designer clothes that probably cost more than most people made in a week. Grant, Valerie said, sliding into the booth across from me. Thank God you're okay. I've been so worried. Julian sat beside her, his smile cold and calculated. Grant, buddy, we need to clear the air about some misunderstandings. There's no misunderstanding, I said. I have photos of you two together. I know about the fake investment scheme. I know you tried to steal my life savings. Julian's smile never wavered. That's a harsh way to put it. We prefer to think of it as a partnership opportunity that didn't work out. Because I discovered you were scamming me. Because you overreacted to some harmless flirtation between Valerie and me, Julian corrected. But that's water under the bridge now. We're here to make you a better offer. Valerie leaned forward. Grant, I made mistakes. I know that. But we can fix this. Julian's found an amazing investment opportunity in Seattle. A restaurant franchise that's guaranteed to triple your money in 2 years. The audacity was breathtaking. They were literally trying to scam me again, using the same playbook that had almost worked the first time. And all I have to do is give you my money and trust that you won't disappear with it, I said. Julian laughed. Grant, you're thinking too small. This isn't about taking your money. It's about making all of us rich. That's when Detective Chun stood up and walked over to our table, badge clearly visible. Julian Andrews and Valerie Hart, she said formally. You're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud. The arrest went smoother than I'd expected. Julian tried to run, made it about 10 feet before Chun tackled him in the parking lot. Valerie just sat there as the handcuffs went on, staring at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. You set us up, she said as Chun read her the Miranda rights. You set yourselves up, I replied. I just stopped being your victim. The backup Chun had called arrived within minutes. 2 sheriff's deputies who helped transport Julian and Valerie back to Portland. Chun stayed behind to take my statement and handle the paperwork. They'll probably try to plead bargain, she told me over coffee the next morning. Julian's got priors, so he's looking at serious time. Valerie might get a lighter sentence if she cooperates. What about their other victims? That's where it gets interesting. Once word gets out about the arrests, we expect more people to come forward. This operation was bigger than we initially thought. I spent 3 days in Bend helping with the investigation, giving detailed statements about how Julian and Valerie had tried to manipulate me. The evidence I'd gathered with Rick Morrison's help proved crucial. Without those photos and financial records, the case would have been much harder to prove. On my last day there, Chun gave me some unexpected news. Chloe's been asking about you, she said. Social services contacted her when her mother was arrested. She's staying with Valerie's sister in Eugene, but she specifically asked if she could talk to you. That caught me off guard. She wants to talk to me. Apparently, she's been doing some growing up in the past few months. Her aunt says Chloe's realized that you were the stable presence in her life, even if she didn't appreciate it at the time. I thought about the kid who'd spent 5 years treating me like hired help, who'd rolled her eyes at every attempt I'd made to connect with her. Maybe losing everything had given her some perspective. What would that look like? I asked. Just a phone call. No obligation beyond that. But the girl's been through a lot. Her mother's in jail. Her whole world's been turned upside down. Sometimes kids need to know that someone still cares about them. That evening, I called Chloe from my motel room. She answered on the second ring. Grant. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered, younger. Hey, kiddo. How are you holding up? I'm sorry, she said immediately. I'm sorry I was such a brat to you. I'm sorry I never said thank you for all the things you did for me. My throat tightened. You don't need to apologize, Chloe. You were just a kid dealing with a complicated situation. Aunt Linda says Mom tried to steal your money. She says that's why you left. It's more complicated than that. But yeah, that's part of it. Are you coming back? The question hung in the air between us. Coming back would mean rebuilding a relationship with a teenager who'd spent years resenting me. It would mean dealing with the aftermath of Valerie's crimes and Julian's manipulation. It would mean giving up the simple quiet life I'd built in Bend. But it would also mean being there for a kid who finally understood that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. We'll figure something out, I told her. Maybe you can come visit me in Oregon sometime. See what life's like in a small town. I'd like that, Chloe said. Grant, I know I never said it before, but thanks for being my dad when my real dad couldn't be bothered. After we hung up, I sat in the motel room thinking about second chances and new beginnings. Maybe running away had been the right choice at the time, but maybe coming back, in some form, was the right choice now. 3 weeks later, I sold the diner in Bend and bought a small restaurant in Eugene, 45 minutes from where Chloe was living. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well and being there for the people who matter. 6 months after Julian and Valerie's arrest, I was running Heart's Kitchen in Eugene, a small family restaurant that specialized in comfort food and decent coffee. The name felt right this time. No more hiding behind fake identities or looking over my shoulder. Chloe visited every other weekend, taking the bus from her aunt's house. The transformation in her was remarkable. Gone was the sullen teenager who treated me like hired help. In her place was a thoughtful 17-year-old who'd learned some hard lessons about family and loyalty. I got accepted to Portland State, she told me one Saturday afternoon while helping prep vegetables for the dinner rush. Full academic scholarship. That's incredible, kiddo. I'm proud of you. She paused her chopping and looked at me directly. I want you to walk me down the aisle at graduation, if that's okay. The request caught me off guard. What about your biological father? What about him? He's been MIA for 17 years. You're the one who showed up to parent-teacher conferences, paid for my education, and never gave up on me even when I was awful to you. I had to clear my throat before responding. It would be an honor. The trial had been a media circus for a few weeks. Julian got 15 years for multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. Valerie pleaded guilty to lesser charges and got 5 years, with possibility of parole in 3. The prosecution had been thorough. They'd found 7 other victims across 3 states, and Julian's pattern of targeting married men with assets was well documented. Detective Chun had kept me updated throughout the process. Your case was the key to everything, she told me. Without your evidence and testimony, we never would have been able to connect all the dots. The money they'd stolen from other victims was mostly gone, but I'd gotten back about $30,000 that Julian had hidden in various accounts. It wasn't much, but it helped with the restaurant startup costs. More importantly, I got my life back. That evening, as Chloe helped me close up the restaurant, she brought up something that had been on both our minds. Have you thought about what you'll do when I graduate and go to college? She asked. Keep running the restaurant. Maybe expand the catering business. What? Because I think you should start dating again. You're only 43, Grant. You've got a lot of life left to live. The kid had a point. I'd been so focused on rebuilding my business and my relationship with Chloe that I hadn't given much thought to romantic relationships. Maybe someday, I said, but I'm in no hurry. I'm finally happy with the life I've built. Chloe smiled. Good. But when you do meet someone, make sure she appreciates what she's getting. Because you're a pretty great dad, even if it took me way too long to figure that out. As we locked up the restaurant and headed to my truck, I realized that the kid was right about something else too. I did have a lot of life left to live. And for the first time in years, I was excited to see what came next. 2 years later, Heart's Kitchen had become a local institution. Food critics from Portland drove down to try our famous pot roast, and we've been featured in Oregon Living magazine as one of the state's hidden gems. I'd hired 3 full-time employees and was considering opening a second location. Chloe was thriving at Portland State, majoring in business with plans to get her MBA. She called me Dad now, without hesitation or awkwardness. The girl who'd once flinched when I tried to hug her goodbye now ended every phone call with "Love you, Dad." On a quiet Tuesday morning in March, I was reviewing invoices when Detective Chen walked into the restaurant. She looked older, more tired, but her smile was genuine. Thought you might want to know, she said, settling into a corner booth. Valerie's being released next month. Good behavior, overcrowding, the usual reasons. I poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from her. How do you feel about that? Honestly, I don't feel much of anything. She's not my problem anymore. She nodded approvingly. That's healthy. But I wanted to give you a heads up in case she tries to contact you. She won't, I said with confidence. Her parole conditions prohibit contact with previous victims. Besides, what would be the point? I've moved on. Chloe's moved on. There's nothing left for her here. What about Julian? Still got 8 years left on his sentence. And even when he gets out, I'm not worried. Some guys learn from their mistakes. Others just get better at hiding them. Either way, he's not my concern. Chun sipped her coffee and looked around the restaurant. You've built something good here, Grant. Something real. Thanks. It feels good to have roots again. After Chun left, I called Chloe to give her the news about her mother's impending release. Her response was matter of fact. I'm not interested in a relationship with her, Chloe said. She made her choices, and I've made mine. You're my family now. That afternoon, while prepping for the dinner rush, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this point. 5 years ago, I'd been a man trapped in a marriage built on lies, working myself to death for people who didn't appreciate the sacrifice. Now I was exactly where I belonged, running a successful business in a town where people knew my name, raising a daughter who'd chosen me as much as I'd chosen her, and building a life based on honesty and hard work. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, my assistant manager from the old Morning Grounds days. She'd moved to Eugene 6 months ago, and we've been dating casually ever since. Dinner tonight? I'll cook if you bring dessert from the restaurant. I smiled and typed back, deal. See you at 7. As I watched the sun set through the restaurant windows, casting golden light across the tables where families shared meals and couples held hands over coffee, I realized something important. I'd stopped running from my old life and started building a new one. And it was exactly the life I'd always wanted.